Okay, we are live streaming. I'm going to call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to remind council and municipal staff that this meeting is being live streamed to the public. All council meetings are also recorded. Recordings will be available to the public on the township's YouTube account. Physical attendance of the public at this meeting is restricted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is held electronically under Bylaw 2020-70 to amend Procedural Bylaw 2018-117 pursuant to Section 238 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended. Okay, now this morning we will forego the national anthem at this time due to technical limitations of our system. So what we will do is move to the adoption of the agenda for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020. There is an amendment to the agenda, 6.1, which is our delegation. We will be including the Township of Madawaska Valley Water and Wastewater Rate Study in the documents that we are discussing. And 16.4 will be Lakewood Subdivision Tender Verbal Update. So the recommendation is that the regular council meeting agenda for Tuesday, October 20th, 2020 be approved as amended. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. All those in favor? And that's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest?
None.
None.
I'm not seeing any. So with that, good morning, everyone. Fall has arrived, and so has hunting season. Since the second wave of COVID-19 is also upon us, the Renfrew County and District Health Unit has released public guidelines on how to safely navigate COVID-19 during the hunting season. These guidelines are available in the news section of the Health Unit's website. Taking precautions before you go and while at your hunt site or hunt camp can keep you from bringing COVID home along with your game. Everyone, please stay healthy, stay safe, and enjoy hunting season. On October 8th, Zone 6 of the Association of Municipal Clerks and Treasurers presented CAO Sue Klatt with a certificate of appreciation in recognition of her contribution to Zone 6 and the advancement of the municipal profession. Sue is a role model and mentor. She is always ready to lend a hand to help others grow and succeed as municipal professionals. On behalf of council, I'd like to recognize Sue's achievement and congratulate her for receiving this well-deserved acknowledgement of her many contributions to her peers and her profession. Thank you. and we really do congratulate you, Sue. That was fantastic. Okay, this is a short mayor's address today because basically everyone's about to go hunting. So we'll move on to delegations and presentations. First, we have Nick Larson, the Senior Project Manager, and Ashley Pilgrim, the Senior Operations Manager of Ontario Clean Water Agency. And we have Jason Yonker, and I don't know what Jason's title is, but maybe you can fill us in, Nick, regarding our drinking water system financial plan. And as I mentioned, also the Township of Madawaska Valley Water and Wastewater Rate Study. So I will turn it over to you, Nick, to enlighten us on the documents you've provided.
Excellent. Thank you. So Jason's title is a project support analyst on the project. And he's done lots of these financial plans and rate studies for us and is the brains behind the spreadsheet, so to speak. So depending on how detailed we get in our review, we may turn things over to Jason, but I'll take the lead from Aqua's side. So with that, so I have, I think it's Gwen who could make me able to share a screen. Sorry, Gwen, we should have primed that. Or if we don't need to look at the document, I could just tell you about it, but I think it might be easier to share a screen and flip you through. Okay, I think that's best.
Sure.
So Gwen, if you could.
Nick, I think just on the bottom of your screen, there should be a little green box.
There is, but it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I need to be promoted to higher authority somehow.
You should be able to go now, Nick.
Awesome. There we go. Yep. Thanks, Gwen. Okay. So there's two documents that we're here to talk about this morning. Both have been issued to the municipality, and both work together in a sense. So what you've got is Ontario Regulation 453, part of the Safe Drinking Water Act, requires you to have a financial plan for your water system. And so that's one of the reports that we've provided. There's specific rules or guidance within that particular regulation around, for example, a 6-year time frame for your financial plan, and things of that nature in terms of what needs to be in it. So that's the first document that is really aligning with a template that we've been asked to follow. The second document is a water and wastewater rate study. So similar or some crossover between the financial plan on your water system and your rate study. The rate study does consider both the water and wastewater portions of your system, where your financial plan was only your water system. And then the rate study is also has a bit more flexibility in terms of scope. So for example, we've done a 20-year outlook, not just the 6-year window that we've been looking at in the financial plan. And as we'll see, the rate study also is our opportunity to touch on various financial elements of how we collect revenue. So both what is the rate model, how much of a volumetric per cubic meter charge is part of the user fee, and how much is a base or fixed cost. So those are some of the differences between the financial plan and the rate study. The other piece that I would point out is the financial plan is not in a cash budget. So when you read the tables, and if they look like your audited financial statements in terms of valuing your tangible capital assets and looking at the expense of annual amortization of your fixed assets show up as an expense, but in your cash budget that you do on an annual basis, you don't have to have the expenses of amortization on your expense side of your cash budget. So there's a little bit of a, what does this mean? I've never seen this before kind of thing happening. And it's because of that nature to take a financial statement perspective for the water system. So that's why you typically see your consolidated financial statements on an annual basis. So that's everything in the township. And now we're looking at basically just those same type of tables just for the water system. Okay. Any questions on the differences before I keep going? So far, so good?
Nope.
I'm not seeing anything now. I can't see Councillor Wilmer because I only have, I don't know if I can access, wait a second, maybe I can access.
If you hit, the top right where you see like more of a grid beside the view, if you click
Okay.
it, you can see.
Mark, do you have your hand up? Did you have a question? No? Okay. I'm just going to have to keep going back and forth, up and down, because all of my is in line. So when you ask something, I'll have to click and double check for hand.
Okay. I've got it set up to see everybody. So, because I got.
Normally I would, but your presentation is taking up to my screen. So,
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So when you read the financial plan document, obviously it's there for circulation. So a lot of this is, boilerplate text that tells you the context of this report, where it fits in the overall system, and what we're trying to do with it in terms of aligning with regulation. What the financial plan is really asking us to do in the water system is to look at, the regulation used to use the term viable. They want to know, this was a post-Walkerton requirement to say, let's make sure we're looking at the financial health of the system. If we bring in the amortization of tangible capital assets or your fixed assets to make up the water system, then we can understand if we're putting enough capital into the system. So that's a piece that's captured through the financial statements, as we can really see whether we're putting enough capital, not just whether the budget that we've got, the revenue will fund the operating expenses, but whether it will fund the capital expenses we've got and more importantly, whether those capital expenses are enough. So that's another piece that this helps us to figure out is both, can we fund all of the capital, and is the right amount of capital on the list, on the to-do list, so to speak. So the conclusions of your financial plan, we start with your operating costs. So we have that from your historic budgets. We've got an estimate of the short term, next 6 years, short to medium term capital works. What I'd point out about specific years that you see here is that they're not written in stone. We know that they may move up, get pushed back, but when we do financial models, we need to put them in a year. So we've picked the best judgment of when we think these projects are likely to proceed. You can see some projects here are talking about $10,000 per year. And some projects are like your standpipe rehabilitation selected for one individual year. So that's just, that doesn't mean that it necessarily will happen in 2023, but what the regulation is asking us is to say, what are the big projects that are out there from a capital perspective? When are we expecting them to occur? And then when we do the analysis, we can say, will we be able to afford these projects? So we don't want to write them in stone, so to speak. And the other piece to mention is that there is some uncertainty in these cost estimates. So again, nothing that we want to take to the bank for 5 years from now. As the projects get closer, we'll go through typical processes. Your work with Ashley, understand what these costs actually are. But they're a good estimate for now, that we would have a class 5 estimate on, which is, it might seem like a huge range, minus 50% plus 100%, but that's, if there's cost estimating literature out there, and that's the error range they give on a class 5 estimate, based on how much project definition we have on those projects. So for example, a class 1 is your most accurate cost estimate, and it's what's called a pre-tender estimate. So it's, you're ready to tender a job, you have an engineer's estimate to assign line items in your capital project. That's your highest, most accurate cost estimate, and it scales back to a class 5 estimate, which is less project definition. So with that, the real conclusions of the financial plan is that based on your current revenues, your current population and consumption levels, the amount of debt and reserves that you've got, that the financial health of the water system is good, with a 2%, assuming a 2% rate increase. So that's the other piece that's different with the rate study. Rate study can get more precise in terms of what the rate model and rate increase could look like. The financial plan, again, is saying, if we want to fund these things and we have a reasonable increase in revenue of 2% per year to account for inflation, we will be able to afford the things on the list for the water system, and therefore it is a viable or has a good financial health when we forecast into the future. So that's a good news story. We're not seeing any pressures on your water system, nothing that's sitting out there that you won't be able to fund based on current revenues and known expenditures.
Okay. Nick, did you want to take questions on this document at this point, or was there more you wanted to explain to council?
No, questions, please, questions.
Okay. Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. Actually, my question relates to talking about capital projects down the road. And you know, there's we're trying to get more people onto the water system, and we have a considerable reserve. However, I really don't think there would be sufficient money there if we're looking at adding on, you know, to the where there's been some building that we can expect in the next little while that would need it to get added on. And where's the money going to come from? Is it something we should be talking about now? Certainly at budget time we should be, and it should be part of a much bigger discussion. But that would, I'd just like to know your your views on that. Should we be adding another, 1 or 2% and putting it into a fund for the future development? So I think we
Right.
need to.
Great question. Yeah. So my response would be stay tuned when we show the rate study report, because that's where we'll have a more focused discussion on what is the balance of a reserve, what should it be, and those sorts of things. So when we start presenting the rate study, it will make more, we'll get to those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have any questions at this point? Yeah, just had to check. Mark, you don't have any questions. Okay. I just wanted to myself come back to just ask you, I think it's on page 5 of the study. I'll use the pages in the study. Page 16, council's agenda. It says that it is noted that this financial plan does not take into consideration the residential and commercial water meter replacement costs in 2020. Does it take into account the future replacement costs in the planning for the future? Or is it that considered a completely separate issue from this?
In future updates to this study, it will capture the need for future water meter replacements. But again, a 6-year scope. So yeah, maybe we can make that sentence a bit more clear. But if there was in one of these bullet points, the need for, if we fast forward 20 years and the water meters are ready for the next generation of water meter, it will say water meters in here.
Okay,
That's
I guess
my understanding.
my question is more about, does the 2% increase capture that additional cost? Because we are now at ground zero. The replacement has been done. I'd like to ensure that in 15 years, say when the meters need to be replaced again, that we have built into our expectation of what the rate will be, that cost will be there to replace those meters. So maybe that's more of a question for the rate study than the financial plan. It
is, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll hold that. I just noted that this said it didn't include it. So I just wanted to verify that in looking at the increase that you're recommending in the rate study, that has been factored in. Okay. So
we'll confirm with Jason, but
Okay.
because it'll be in the longer term window. If it's there,
Yes.
then it'll be in the rate study.
Okay, so that's something council needs to know, because if it's not, then we do have to factor that in considering what our rates will be. My other question was, I was going to ask, actually, I'm wondering if Amanda is on. I wanted her, just for the sake of council and the public, to clarify in the financial plan, it mentions other revenue and general revenue transfer. And if Amanda is available, I wanted her to just clarify for the public what those two revenue streams are and what they are in the 2020 budget. What are they for, and what amounts do they represent?
So
Are you there? Good.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So those numbers or those amounts are related to any sort of administrative charges. So we have miscellaneous revenues where we, if a property is sold, then we charge an administrative charge for reading the meters to ensure that the balance owing is transferred, or is not transferred to the new owners, but rather is paid for by the current owner. And because it typically takes place outside of our water billing system or our timelines, then we have to do additional work, and so we charge an additional fee for that. So that's part of some of the miscellaneous revenues. And then transfers from general is we take into consideration at budget time that if the water and wastewater systems had their own sort of office of administrative staff that would take care of the billings, would take care of the meter readings, and any sort of the work that we within the municipal office do with relation to that. We do a calculation based on hours of staff time within the municipal office and transfer that back over to the water and the wastewater budget from the general budget over to the water and wastewater budget, just so that there's a true capture of what some of those expenses would be. So that's what those amounts are.
Okay, Amanda, that would refer to the expense. What we do we not also do a transfer to cover water usage by the fire department?
Yes, we do. So
When you transfer?
so we transfer from the for the use of the fire department because if there's a fire call in town, they have to hook up to the hydrants, and we don't know what those amounts are. So we do an annual sort of calculation of what we think that should be to make it sort of more even throughout the years, so that it's not one major hit of a large capture of a cost.
Okay, so generally any transfer of revenue into this budget is to pay for water that was used to service the entire municipality through those processes.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted it to be very clear because always in our municipality, there are concerns raised that customers are paying for the service that they're receiving, and those that aren't receiving the service aren't paying for it. So noting those items in the financial plan, I just wanted everyone to understand what they were and that they don't represent a subsidization of the water system by the taxpayer.
No, definitely.
Okay. Sorry, that's more of a political thing, Nick, but I just needed to make certain it was very clear to the public. These
Absolutely.
can become hotbed issues if you're not ensuring everyone understands. Does anyone else have any other questions on the financial plan itself? Okay, and I still can't see Mark. I'm sorry, Mark. There we are. Mark, did you have any questions? No? Okay. So maybe then the really meaty document we need to move into then is the water and wastewater rate study. Nick, did you want to
Perfect.
take us into that?
Awesome. So here we got a rate study, and what I'd point out is, the financial plan, we don't want to say it's a bit of a rubber stamp, but to some extent, it's a checkbox. It needs to go with your drinking water works permit. It is a final document, and Ashley's got a PCT who's dying for your approval on the financial plan so we can submit our drinking water license. So that's one piece, and it is considered a final document and looking for blessing. What we pointed about the rate study is that it's been submitted in draft, and so we do want to have this opportunity to engage with council and look for opportunities. When we start getting this scenarios, is there an alternative scenario? Do we, how do we want to take it from here to help it better meet your expectations and those sorts of things? So that's the first thing I point out, is that it is a draft submission. So with that, I guess maybe a simple thing about the approach of a rate study. So again, there's four main things. We forecast future expenditures, operating and capital. We then forecast future water consumption based on population growth, and we can talk about water efficiency measures and growth, net growth in the municipality. The third piece is what's the structure of the bill. So how much is a flat rate versus a variable rate? And then the fourth piece is what's the actual cost of that bill. So there's both a structure to the bill piece and a dollar value to the bill piece. So for a reminder, I'm sure you all know this, but your current water bill structure is a volumetric rate, certain dollars per cubic meter applied to the meter readings, but there is a minimum charge of 15 cubic meters, which is analogous to a base fee. Right? So there's a certain amount of revenue, no matter how little water your consumer uses, they're paying a minimum quarterly bill of 15 meters cubed multiplied by your current water rate. So on the water, it's $70 per month, or minimum quarterly bill, $70 per quarter. Okay, so now we'll get into the forecast. So there's the expenditure forecast, step one. Two types of expenditures, operating and capital. Operating, I would say fairly straightforward. So what we do is we look at your 2016 to 2019 budgets with your, a bit of history to make sure that if 2020 is an anomaly year, then we can capture that by looking at a couple years of historic costs to say, okay, what does it make sense from our starting point to forecast forward? That's number one. Here's your total expenditures of the water system, $414,000 and moving forward. And these are for things that we classify as the operating contract, materials and supplies, wages and benefits, what we call major maintenance or non-capital, but bigger expenditures to at the facilities, and also costs for what we call investigations and studies. So this report itself, the rate study, and other investigations would fall under that category. So there's your water system, and here's your wastewater system. And again, we can project that in the future, showing how the operating costs change over the next 20 years. So that's your first expenditure piece, is operating. And again, those are forecasted based on inflationary assumption of 2% per year. So baseline inflation, or standard inflation, we'll say, if you look at your historic inflation numbers, that's the number that is generally used or typically used within this type of study. So second category of expenditures we need to forecast are capital expenditures. So because we're looking at, again, here's your 6-year total that match your financial plan. And then we've also got a 20-year forecast, which again, everybody jokes around who's got the crystal ball from year 11 to 20. But what we're trying to do is recognize that there will be life cycle replacement needs on the infrastructure. We've done a condition assessment of all the systems as part of a separate project that we're also doing for you. So we've assessed all the infrastructure. The stuff that's currently in fair condition will eventually require replacement in the long-term window. So that's what we're doing. And to the councillor's point around growth and accommodating expansions, that's going to be in your future, 6 to 20 year time frame in that long-term window. So the capital costs are here. What you see when we start getting into the details, your short-term costs are an average of the water system of about $60,000 per year, but your overall long-term average is $100,000 per year in capital, which means that in that long-term window, your capital expenditures will be greater than they are in the next 6 years, because the wastewater plant's is new, the water plant's relatively new. Things are in decent shape now, but obviously these plants have a life cycle to them. And in that long-term window, we expect to see more spending required than what we see in the next 6-year window. So that's captured in both the water system, which has a $60,000 per year, next 6 years average annual capital, and then $100,000 average annual capital over the whole 20-year planning window. And similarly on the wastewater side, $50,000 in the short term, the next 6 years per year, rising to $100,000 per year on average over the long-term planning horizon. So this gets back to the question of, we'll get into it, how much makes sense to have in reserve funds as we start to collect revenue and have money set aside for future capital work. So that's part of this discussion, is that based on the nature of your system, that certainly seems to be what we're seeing, is that we know that the future capital will be greater than the short-term capital. So that's good. We're in a good position. It's in the long term, but we start prudent planning now, and we can make sure that we won't be between a rock and a hard place, so to speak, in the future with a bunch of work and not enough money to do it. So that's the capital forecast. Before I go on, any questions on the capital?
Yeah, Nick, do you want to take specific questions about specific items at the end where they're in the spreadsheet?
Yes, I think that makes the most sense.
Some of the items that were included in the wastewater treatment plant throughout the long-term view, and I'd like to make sure that council is comfortable with some of the things that were included and that we understand why they're there. But would you rather take those questions in when we can all look at the spreadsheet?
Yeah. Let's get to the end, and we'll go to the Appendix A spreadsheet or Appendix B, and I think then we'll get into that detailed chat. Okay, so
okay, that's great.
Capital Perfect. Okay, so that's capital. It's there. We'll get to the spreadsheet and we can talk about what projects are in that spreadsheet. Okay, so the next major piece that we do is talk about consumption forecast. So we know that if you grow, as you grow, you'll have more people buying water, and more people move to the community, and you'll see revenues go up. And so what we do is forecast population increase. And so in a community like Madawaska Valley that doesn't have, an official planning growth forecast, let's say, where we can say, here's the actual expectations for population growth. We've done a forecast, and what the term is organic population growth. So this is with no big developments, no, things that we didn't know about. Just if we keep going how you've been going, you've been growing at 0.74% per year. You see your population increase from 1,086 to 1,259, and over the 20-year period from 1996 to 2016. And so we then extrapolate that number into the future based on that population growth rate. And again, a conversation we get into is, does that make sense? How do are there some net new development? Amanda and I had a chat around a new hydro water consumer that might be moving to town. I think there's a greenhouse operation, those sorts of things. So on top of the organic forecast of population growth, we can get into other things that might impact consumption. So here's your graphs. So your red line on your water plant is your design capacity. And then here's your historic and projected water demand, your peak water demand, and your average day demand. So that's how we look at water stuff, is what's the average consumption in a day, and then what's your peak consumption in a day. So you can see here, even in 20-year period, you're well below your design capacity of your water treatment plant. So you're not looking at the need for a water plant expansion in the 20-year planning horizon. Similarly, on the wastewater system, we can do the same thing. Here's your historic production numbers at the plant, how much wastewater has been received. Again, an average and a peak. What you do see here is the peak crossing this design capacity line. But what I would point out is that this is a peak flow, so this number should be compared against your peak capacity way up here. So you're looking for this average flow to not be above your design capacity, but your peak capacity is greater. What that would mean in reality is Ashley and the team, just dial up the plant a little differently and make sure that we can accommodate the peak flows when they happen, while still maintaining the water quality effluent requirements. So it's more of an operational change. When those days happen, they do happen, in the summer sporadically. You're not like you're going to be receiving that amount of water for an extended period of time. So again, the wastewater plant, no capacity expansion needed, which is good because you just built it. So hopefully it was big enough, and it appears to be big enough. So that's good. That doesn't mean that there won't be major pieces of those facilities that do require rehabilitation and replacement as they age over that long-term period. So that's your consumption forecast. Any questions on consumption?
Okay,
Yeah.
not
Sorry.
see. Oh, wait, Councillor Poplinski, is your hand up?
It is indeed.
Okay,
If I
go,
could-
Councillor.
If I could just direct a question regarding the population estimates, and I assume that these statistics are taken up to at least last year, and we're currently seeing quite a movement because of the COVID and everything else. A lot of people are looking at moving out of the cities, coming up here. Real estate numbers will verify that. And I think what we're seeing, and just looking at our permits, there are permits that people are buying some of the older homes, fixing them up. And the village of Barry's Bay is going to be a very attractive place for many people. And I'm just wondering, when you're saying that 0.74%, which is like half of the Canadian average, if the current stats certainly bear that out, because I think we're going to be undershooting by a big shot if we don't consider the current situation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Would that be a fair statement?
if your observations are pointing that out, it's 100% fair. And when we get into scenarios, so we'll start talking about scenarios, but what we would need to look at a scenario like that is more explicit direction from the township on, let's look at a 2%, how many people per year do you think will be moving to your community? I mean, if you're a bigger community, you have a planning person on staff. I understand you don't have a planning person on staff, but we can engage in a conversation offline, after this session, what makes sense, 2% per year, 3% per year, and we can get into scenarios which look at the impact of a higher growth rate in the community and what that would do to the rates and the consumption forecast.
Thank you.
Okay, Nick, if we were going to look at something like that, though, we would have to recognize that the number of properties that are serviced currently isn't going to necessarily grow significantly. There may be some intensification within the village, which would add users through being redeveloped into apartments and multiple tenancies then, or anything like that that would intensify. But is it going to be a significant enough change in the population of Barry's Bay without factoring in new development? And I know Councillor Proplinski brought this up, but if we were looking at extending the system, we would be doing that in conjunction with a developer. And to a certain extent, I would anticipate that the cost of that additional development would be borne by the developer.
Correct. I would agree with that. The
So-
cost to build the infrastructure, to build the water mains would be borne by the developer. Yes.
Right. So that may be a factor in the future. We don't have anything firm yet, but at the moment, there's a limit to how much the intensification of the Village of Barry's Bay's existing system would add to the use of the system, I think. So I'm not sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Even if you looked at 2%, it would cap or stop after so many years because you can only expand it so far without doing additional development.
Right. I would say it's not going to result in the need to expand either plant sooner than what we've seen. It's more when we start getting into the actual rate calculation where we say total consumption and come up with the dollar per cubic meter. If we're getting net growth in water production or water sales, then we may be able to back off to say a 1% rate increase because we're getting net revenue from new people buying water. So
Right.
It's going to be in that, rate calculation in order to what's the number we need to match our expenses. So yeah, it's not going to have a noticeable impact on the need to expand the plant.
At this point, we certainly have significant design capacity that we're not using. The plants have always been well under, the use has been well under the capacity of the plants. So you're not seeing, even if we do have growth within the confines of Barry's Bay, you don't think there's going to be a need to add on to the plants. It's not going to affect our ability to work within our design capacity.
No, it's probably great because you've got the plants and you can service more people. So the more people, the better. It's great because some communities will say people are coming, but we got to replace all. We have a lagoon and we need a wastewater plant. You're already there, so you're right for attracting those people. For sure.
Right. So what Councillor Proplinski is talking about is a good news story for us.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
So if we see that
Okay.
growth, then a couple of years down the road, we could reassess the rate study and then incorporate that into it, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so billing structure, we didn't want to, turn this part into a science project like some of the bigger rate studies, but just wanted to give council and staff a perspective on what other places in Ontario do. So common variations of rate models are obviously flat rate. If you didn't have meters, you've got meters. Everybody prefers meters. They make much more sense. They're more equitable. You pay for what you use. So when we start talking about metered rates, there's volumetric charges that are either, this case of Madawaska Valley, a constant rate, same price per cubic meter. And then for perspective, as you grow and consider, your community moving forward, there's two types of block rate models that are done in the industry. One is called a declining block rate, where your first cubic meters is a certain price, and then the second cubic meter is actually a lower cost. So for each block, it gets cheaper and cheaper, and that's really to reduce the cost of water to large users. So if you're attracting big water users, the manufacturing facilities, they're not paying the retail rates or the customer rate, residential rate for all of the water they use. And so it gets cheaper the more they use, and it helps attract them to a community. So that's one strategy for attracting large water users. And the second way that rates are adjusted is something called an increasing block rate. This is where your first block is a certain amount, and your second block is a higher price, and that's used like your time of use pricing for electricity as a conservation technique. So to encourage people to reduce their peak water consumption, some municipalities put in an increasing block rate to make the more water they use to get more expensive. And then there's obviously a base charge where the minimum charge is applied, similar to how you've done it. Some municipalities will say it's $50 is your base fee, and then a consumption on top of it. So your way of doing it is analogous to a base charge plus a volumetric fee on top of that. Something to point out is that the preferred way of setting up rates is to have a combination of a base fee plus a volumetric rate, and that's because the volumetric rate can be highly volatile based on water consumption trends. So a really hot summer, you can't control that. It's not within anything the township can look at. And so in order to stabilize revenues, you have your base fee, which is your nice stable fee. It's not going to go anywhere. And then you've got your volumetric rate on top of that. So that helps to just reduce your volatility in your revenues, because as Amanda will say, finance people, they like stable revenues. So we don't want to see big fluctuations on a year-to-year basis in the water consumption. Okay, so the preferred billing structure that we recommended is to keep your current billing structure. That might sound trivial, but we've looked at it. It's a good combination of a base plus a volumetric rate. There's no need to change it from what we're seeing, and to reduce the administrative burden and try and rejig how you've done everything. Our recommendation is to keep it where it is now, with your base charge equal to 15 cubes per quarter, and then a volumetric charge applied above 15 cubic meters. Anyone have any questions on the rate structure?
Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I guess let's carry on.
Okay. So another bit we've done, just for perspective, is throwing a bit of a comparator against some of your neighbors. So here you are, Madawaska Valley at the bottom. As you can see, you're along the higher end. You're less than Bancroft, but you're more than some of your peers. So back to the conversation we were talking about earlier, you are providing a higher level of service. You've got 2 full plants that provide water and wastewater services. They provide a higher level of service than lagoon and a well system. So we expect the cost to maintain that system to be higher. So nothing unexpected from seeing that you're, toward the higher end. You're not that much higher, but towards the higher end of some of your neighbors.
Right, Nick, I mean, one of the challenges of doing a direct comparison is that you're not comparing apples to apples, because we can't be certain that each of these communities has designed a rate structure in a way to ensure that they can meet their capital costs going into the future. I would suggest that we recently saw an article in the newspaper in regards to Killigrew, Haggerty, and Richards, suggesting that they hadn't increased their rates in 10 years, and they were using other revenue sources to offset the additional costs. So I wouldn't have the public look at this particular graph and say, oh my God, why is Madawaska Valley so expensive? We have been very clear that this is a user pay system, that we are ensuring that there are no additional revenue sources that aren't, as I very clearly had Amanda identify, that aren't actually items that are used by the general municipality that are in this revenue stream. So our process may be a little more rigorous than other municipalities, and I wouldn't want the public to look at this and just say, oh, why is their rates so high? Because
Sure.
it's not
Yeah.
apples to apples, and we don't know for a fact that each of these communities is taking the same approach to ensuring they have the funds to do the repairs, or to ensuring that that they have a purely user pay system. So I
Yeah,
would.
fair enough. We can remove this. Absolutely.
No, I'm not
We always
asking you
get
to
some-
remove it. I just want to identify at this point that, we recently saw this article, and so clearly not everyone is doing exactly the same thing in exactly the same way.
For
So
sure.
it may not be 100% comparable.
I agree with that 100%.
So if council has any thoughts on that, I just wanted to identify that for those who may watch this meeting, and for the press to be aware. But I have no concern with leaving it in.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay?
Excellent. So, onto the rate calculation. So without getting into the details of it, we've done two scenarios. One is what we've done is said, what if we look at a 2% rate increase on the water and wastewater system? What will that look like in terms of revenue? And will we be able to fund all of the projects that we're seeing as a way of doing a sort of first baseline check? How does just a 2% rate increase look moving forward? So what we can see in the water system is that by then what you're looking at here is a graph showing your reserve climbing to over 2.5 million by the end of the planning horizon. So that shows you that 2% can fund all the projects that are forecasted and stockpile your reserve. So 2% looks to be good. And on the wastewater treatment system, similarly, when we look at it, we see a dip here in 2030, where we'll actually need more cash than what's available. And you can see the reserve dipping before climbing back up. So to us, when we see this, we think it's an indication that 2% is not sufficient in order to fund the project. Sorry, I see a typo in that title. My apologies. We will fix that. So that's our first cut. Was water looked good at 2%, maybe a little too good, and wastewater looked like 2% wasn't quite enough. And in the 2%, it looks like there's not going to be sufficient revenue to complete all of the capital works on the wastewater plant. So then the second scenario we've done is looking at what's the minimum rate increase to avoid a deficit. So that's sort of looking on the water system. What we've looked at is you have a current debt loan that expires in 2034. And we said, you know what, when that debt gets paid off, we'll be able to have the money we're currently using to service the debt for other purposes. And we have looked at modeling reducing the rate increase to 0% at that time. And you can see that now that puts your water reserve at 1.7, almost 1.8 million, instead of the 2.5 million, which we had in scenario one. So it reduces the amount in your water reserve, but still a healthy reserve. On the wastewater system, we've said, well, we'll give it a few years of high rate increases in the early years, and then back it off to 2% with inflation, and then similarly aligned with the finish of your current loan payment in 2035, that we'll be able to dial it back to 1% in those years as the debt comes off the books and you've got more revenue to fund capital. And then there you can see here, you've got a reserve that by the end of 2040 climbs to 2 million. And although we have 1 year where we're in a deficit situation, we can offset that by just stick handling where those projects go forward or backward. And we can avoid that situation and have a healthier financial situation and sufficient reserve revenues to fund the capital works in the wastewater system. So that's the kind of high level analysis of those two scenarios. 2% looks good for the foreseeable future for the water, and then able to really dial it back. And on the wastewater system, to put in higher rate increases in the short term so that we can start increasing the revenue and putting that money into a reserve fund for some of the projects that are further down the line. So with that, I'll just open it up for questions, and we'll That'll lead us to this nice table at the end on the capital plan summary for both systems. And let's get into the details. So, questions, please.
Nick, before I go to council, maybe it will help if I ask the question I'm going to ask, because I'm not sure I understand the graphs, the reserve and surplus deficit graphs. The reserve, the legend says reserve/debt. So are you suggesting at times we would be using the reserve and at times we would be in debt? And then the other line, the one that actually dips below zero, says surplus deficit. I'm not sure I understand what those two lines are actually showing me. Could you just explain them?
Sure. So I'm going to throw Jason on the spot to get him used
Okay.
to this. Jason, why don't you take this question?
Yeah, so in this case, we're just kind of considering the debt and reserve as a combination, so that it's kind of the floating amount of available funds that you have. So you could have $800,000 in reserve and $200,000 in debt, and that would work out to a combination of around $600,000 in reserve.
So if this blue line was below zero, it would be debt.
Mhm.
Since it's above zero, it's reserve.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's
You
what this
have,
legend
you have
means.
more reserve if you're above zero than dead. But since you
Okay.
usually have a combination of the two, in this case for Madawaska Valley, it's kind of represents a both.
Okay, so Jason, every one of these blue lines on these graphs does stay above zero.
Yeah.
So we would, so this is what I was trying to understand. So from a perspective of reserves, every one of these blue lines, there is money in reserves. It never dips below zero where we would actually have to borrow to do one of the capital projects. Is that?
The only one that gets close is scenario one on the wastewater side.
Yes.
And that's was a little bit of a concern for us because we had a large number of major projects in that area. And as we kind of know, there the estimates on those major projects are the plus 50 to 100% or negative 50 to 100% range. So if you were putting in some sort of air bars on this, it would dip into the negative.
Okay. Now, can you just explain to me what the surplus deficit line, the sort of reddish line is, so I understand what
Okay,
it's.
that's just the year-to-year change in the reserve.
Okay.
So if it was flat to cross zero, then you wouldn't be changing the yearly reserve amount.
Okay, it's the change in the reserve. So I don't have to be concerned when it dips below zero because it's just talking about change in the in reserve. It's not saying the reserve is dipped below zero.
Yes.
Okay. No, I want to understand what I'm looking at and you know, believe it or not, I'm an economist and I struggled.
Well, that's good. So we will bring some clarity to the graphs and make sure that we label it better.
Yeah.
Because I think that's important. Yeah.
Yeah, because his explanation makes it clear. And that was helpful because when I looked at them, I was trying to understand how we could go that far in debt at any point.
Yeah.
Okay. With that explanation, which I hope helped, is there anyone on council who has any questions about that section?
No.
Not seeing any hands up. Okay, I don't think I had any other questions in that section. I just wanted to understand it better. All right, could we go to the actual choices of projects, the graph that you had at the end, which is, I think, page 26 of your document. And I don't, it's not on the agenda package, so I can't suggest an item, a page and number for that. Okay, so there's all of the projects are outlined here on this. This is what, our 20-year window?
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone on council have any questions about any of these projects for the water plant? And I've got to better check and see if anyone. I'm not getting, where did Mark go?
I'm here.
Oh, there's Mark. Okay, Mark, did you have questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. So now I can, the person I can't see is Carl. You gotta love this. And Dave, I can't see either of them. Do either of you have any questions?
No, I don't.
Okay, and Dave?
Yeah, none here.
Okay, actually, that was helpful because it brings you up on the first screen for me. So my only question was, and maybe Ashley is going to be the one who can answer it. In 2029, 2030, there's $500,000 over the 2 years for distribution mains. Ashley, could you explain what that is and what that entails?
So I'll take that one.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so
Ashley.
somebody could.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is there's a few locations in town where there's been a couple of water main breaks over the last few years. The VFDs have been installed in the high lift pumps, which is a variable frequency drive. And what that does is it reduces some of the surges in pressure when a pump starts. We think that may have solved the problem in terms of making the water mains break when the pump starts and you get a sudden pressure fluctuation. But we do think it's prudent, based on what we're seeing, to have an allowance for a couple of water main replacement projects, intersection to intersection, in that long-term window, to be prudent about that. We don't do age-based plans. We're not saying every water main lasts for 80 years, therefore replace them all in 2035. We take a more pragmatic approach. So that's what those two projects are there is. There's an expectation, and we think it's prudent to plan to do a couple of water main projects in that long term. We'll continue to monitor the breaks that are occurring every year and see if they have been stopped or if they will continue to get bad, in which case a couple of projects will need to happen.
Okay, great. And I assume then Aqua will work with our staff to ensure that obviously if there's going to be a water main replacement, that we want to combine that with road resurfacing and make sure we're doing this as efficiently as possible. Now I see Mark has his hand up. Mark, did you want to?
Just a question on that. So those two $250,000 payments in 2029 and 2030, that's the reason for the big dip at that point, right? On our previous graphs on the deficit reserves.
So that dip was in your wastewater plan. So
Okay.
The dip in that is related to some of these bigger
Okay,
expenditures
this
over
is
here.
okay.
So this is water.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Emma, does that help explain what you're looking at? Are you good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else on the water plant and the water system? Because that's what this first graph is. Any other questions? Is council good with everything that's in here? No concerns? Not seeing any? Okay, wait a minute. Now I can't see Councillor Poplinski. 1 second. Sorry. Councillor
No, I'm
Poplinski,
good.
do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. I think it's a good report and I think we've had a good discussion, so I'm good with
Okay.
it.
All right, could we move to the other one? I think that's where I'm going to have most of my questions is on the water side. Council, do you want me to just plow through a series of questions I have on the wastewater side? Because obviously this is the part that concerns me the most.
Yeah.
All right. In 2021, the 35,000 that's listed with concrete tankage, ISM trains, digesters, sludge storage, is that the walkways around the large lagoons, the SBRs? I'm wondering if anybody could
That's
tell
a
what
Jason
that's.
question.
Yes, I believe it is the walkways.
Okay. All right, so that explains to me what it is. The office renovations for 40,000 that in 2022, what kind of renovations are we looking at there?
I believe Ashley might be able to provide more details
Okay.
on that.
Ashley, can you enlighten us?
Yeah, certainly, Kim. It was for like a new roof and siding and flooring inside.
Okay, so it included a roof.
Yes, I had quoted it, I believe 3 or 4 years ago now. Just something that's been on the list or to keep in mind of down the road.
Okay. All right. No, I mean, obviously we don't want to redecorate the office. So it's all things, no, just making sure the public understands it's all things
Yes, certainly.
to To be replaced and are integral to having a functioning plant. Okay. The ISM, ISAM covers, it's 2026, 150,000. Is that what the 150,000 is? And if so, can somebody explain to me what these covers are? And I think it was also the grit channel it was going to cover.
Yes, in terms of ISAM covering, one of the major factors for treatment at this sort of at a wastewater system is temperature. And so we have a lot of problems in our systems when winter kicks in, all of a sudden the ammonia treatment can be drastically affected. So just covering the tanks from an open tank in the middle of winter to just a covered tank can drastically decrease the influence of the outside weather on the temperature of the tank.
Okay, and maybe this is to Ashley. So if we were to do that, would that assist the operation of the plant to not fluctuate out of compliance with, I think it's
Yes.
phosphorus? So it would be a good thing to do because it has been challenging to keep phosphorus at the low level that we are required to keep it.
And the ammonia requirement as well. But
Yes.
yes, that was one of the things that we'd also applied for. I believe it was ISEP funding earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of the components that was in there. And I believe that was also identified in the FOP that we had completed last year. So
Okay,
operationally, yes.
Yes, okay, so that's good to know. They would be certainly helpful in keeping us in compliance and make the plant more efficient. So I don't have a concern with that. I just want to understand what's in this plan. Okay, where I do have a concern is $50,000 for the septage receiving station. The concern is that that would not be paid for by these customers, so it should not form part of the rates. The septage receiving station was originally built for the rural customers to be able to have their septage brought to the plant. It's not operational. So I'm wondering, unless anyone on council has an objection, I'd like to see that 50,000 taken out of this, because if we were to do it, if council was to agree to make the septage receiving station operational, the cost of that would be borne by the people who would be using it, which would be those who have septic systems in our community. So I'd like to see that 50,000 come out of here. I don't think it's going to make a huge change in your rates, but I clearly identify anything in relation to the septage receiving unit has to be paid for by those who would be using it. So that would be a completely different factor. Does anyone on council have any concerns with my request? Councilor Kaplinski?
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it should be taken out. And at some time down the road, if the decision spend the hundreds of thousands of dollars to make it workable, then we'll address it at that time. I'm just wondering why it is showing up here now.
Okay, I don't know. I guess it's something
So
that,
technically, the work is on the list because if the FOP identified that a mixer is required in order to accept septage hauling. So it's sort of, we'll call it the engineering amount of money you would need to put it in service, notwithstanding the who pays for it discussion. So it has never been commissioned to my knowledge. I think Ashley and I were chatting about that. So it's to get to a point where it needs to have a mechanical mixer in order for it to be commissioned. So that's why it's there.
okay.
But we can take it off.
Nick, could you just make it a note in the report rather than including it in the calculation for the rates?
Sure. Yeah,
It's good
absolutely.
information to have in the report, but I don't want it shouldn't be a factor in our rate calculation, not that it's a huge amount.
Yep, absolutely.
Council
We'll
good
make
with
a note of
that? I think we want to capture the information without having it in the rates. Then I just have one final question, and this is probably operational, and it's a biggie, 500,000 for dewatering. Now, I've seen dewatering at Mississippi Mills. I mean, it's a Cadillac, it's wonderful, but somebody convinced me we need to have 500,000 for dewatering at our wastewater plant. Can anyone convince me, or is it just something that was on the list? Because that's a big factor in the wastewater rates. I'll even ask Ashley to speak to it if he can convince me. Try.
I won't sell it to you.
So the FOP identified it. We've had, if you haven't met Hank before on our side, we've had chats around, you know, the return on investment in putting in the dewatering. There's, you know, as we move towards 2030, it's in that long-term window. You know, I&I issues, there may be reasons to have, you know, when we start talking about where the plant's going, that there may be the need for the dewatering system. It's certainly in the long term. And, you know, Jason and I've talked about where you're going to put it. Do you need a new room and all those sorts of things? So it's one of those things where it was identified in the FOP as the one thing that could bring your plant up to, you know, top level. But again, the need versus nice to have, when we start talking about that and a financial return on investment, right now can't be justified from a financial perspective, but in the long term, we think there may be an opportunity to justify that project.
Okay. Is it possible to, it's a fairly large amount and it probably is having a significant impact on dipping the reserve in wastewater. I'm wondering if it's possible to look at the rate study with it and without it. I mean, that would be a decision.
Certainly possible. Yeah.
Goodly ways down the road. And I would like to see what the sort of your best guess at what the rate should be going forward without it look like. And just, that's a much future council's decision. We know the whole front end of this isn't going to change, but I would like to see that. I don't know if council would as well, because as I say, it may be something we have to do with changes in regulation, but at the moment it isn't. It is, you know, a really nice system, but not necessary. Any thoughts from council on that? Councillor Wilmer.
Yeah, I know you say it's something for a much future council, but I think it really impacts right now when we're setting our rates. Whether we go with 4% loading up at the front, we may, if this isn't in there, we may not have to go quite that high. Is that correct?
It would be less for sure. I can't tell you what the number would be without running the spreadsheet, but it would be lower than it is now. Absolutely.
So
thank you.
Could it be something then that we'll ask them to do? It may not change the first few years of rates going forward, but it may start to may allow a decrease in the wastewater rate increases more rapidly if it wasn't in there. And as I say, I think that's a future council decision that I'd kind of like to have both cases available.
Sure.
Any concerns with that?
No.
No, just a sec. Sorry, gentlemen. I love this Zoom stuff. I have to make sure I can see everyone. Councillor Bromwich is okay with that? Okay. He's good with having both in there just for our information, and I'm not seeing any other concerns. So I think that answers all the questions I had with the wastewater spreadsheet and the plans going forward. Any other questions about this report? I was really excited to get this report, gentlemen, because it shows that we've been we're doing our best to make changes to our rates, and it appears we've been pretty much at the beginning point of what you've just shown us is what we've been doing. So it's nice to see that based on us looking at our annual numbers, we've actually come up with doing what it now says we obviously should have been doing. We are doing it. So good to see. We now have quite a substantial justification that can be provided to the public for why our rates are increasing.
Yeah, and I think a reasonable rate increase as well. You see a lot of rate studies which are 10% a year for 10 years because they've got goofy age-based analysis going on. So ours is not doing that. It's a well thought out plan.
Right. No, I was really pleased to get both of these documents and have a good comfort level that with those minor changes that it's providing all the information that council needs today and going forward to be able to ensure that this is a viable system. Both systems are viable. Any questions or comments from council? Now I can see you all on the screen. Anything further from council? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So I do believe we have to have a resolution to adopt the drinking water system financial plan. Sue, is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, could I get a mover to accept or adopt? Which do I want to do?
Accept.
To accept the drinking water system financial plan. Moved by Councillor Schulist, seconded by Councillor Bromwich. Any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. I've lost. Oh, there he is.
Thanks,
Jason.
everyone.
Everyone keeps moving around. Thank you, Ashley. We appreciate you being here and taking the time to explain this all to us. And Nick, if you can get back to us after Jason tweaks our rate study, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll give you a revised draft.
Yeah, Sue, you wanted to comment?
Yes, I did. So the comment that you made for the mover and seconder was to accept the financial plan draft. But I think the treasurer was hoping that you also accepted the draft water and wastewater rates study presented with identified amendments so they can come back to council.
Well, do you want a separate motion? Because I know we need a specific motion for that financial plan.
Okay.
So go off into that, off to the province where it needs to go. So can I get a mover and a seconder to accept the water and wastewater rate study draft with the amendments as discussed? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Tidies that up. And thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate your time this morning. It was very enlightening.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Excellent. Oh, that was good. Now I have to find my agenda. Okay. Getting back to our agenda, our next item will be confirmation of the minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes of September 15th, 2020. The recommendation is that the regular council meeting minutes for September 15th, 2020 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Is there any errors or omissions on these minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next is the special council meeting minutes of September 22nd, 2020. The recommendation is that the special council meeting minutes of September 22nd, 2020 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Any errors or omissions on these minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next, our special council meeting minutes of October 1st, 2020. The recommendation is that the special council meeting minutes for October 1st, 2020 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Poplinski. Any errors or omissions on these minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Council, the public meeting minutes of October 6, 2020 were sent out to you by email. They just got missed in the agenda package. I hope you all received them. The recommendation is that the public meeting minutes for October 6, 2020 be approved as presented. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any errors or omissions on these minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, whew. We have our council and committee meeting minutes for October 6, 2020. They're written a little bit differently. And so what I will do, I need to know from council, do you want to go through them section by section, chair by chair, or do you, and approve the recommendations from your committee with your own motion, or would you prefer to do them all as one after going through section by section to ask if the chair has any comments? Any preferences here? Do them as we've usually done them, or make it one recommendation for them all?
One recommendation, I would say, if we could, to you, Mayor.
Okay, anyone?
Speed the process up.
Okay, I will still go through and ask each chair if there's any comments you had on your recommendations.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Okay, no, that's fine. We're trying to make this more efficient and effective. So we'll start with operations, roads and waste management, and I'll just ask Chair Bromwich if he had any comments on the recommendations from his committee.
I have none, thank you.
Okay. The next one is Recreation and Community Development Committee, and I'll ask Chair Wilmer if he has any comments on the recommendations from his committee.
Sorry, no, I don't have any additional comments.
Okay. On planning matters and statutory meeting under the Planning Act, I'm the chair and I had nothing further to add to the recommendations. And on finance and administration, as chair, I also had nothing further to add to the recommendations. So I guess we're going to give Sue an opportunity to read them all. Sue, how would you like to start from the beginning and read through all the recommendations, and then I'll see if council wants to discuss them.
Okay, through the chair, operations, roads and waste management, we had 4. That the fingerboard program is dissolved in 2021 and that staff notify the 6 fingerboard businesses of this change. That staff proceed in surveying and registration of the lands in the vicinity of 613 Tamarack from Jean and Christine Marshaw for road purposes, and that all costs be borne by the township and that costs be expensed to account 10814-785084. That staff proceed in surveying and registration of the roadway in exchange for the shoreline road allowance in the vicinity of property owned by Daryl and Barb Lukovich, Francis Ann Koulis, Ohio Road for road purposes, and that all costs be borne by the township, and that costs be expensed to activity 148, account 10814-785084. That the operations manager is directed to apply for the 2021-2022 Connecting Link funding intake as proposed. Under recreation, we also had 4 recommendations. That the Commermere Recreation Committee meeting minutes of September 28, 2020 be accepted as presented. That the Community Resource Center Game On report is received as information and that staff are directed to provide access once weekly to the Community Resource Center for Game On programming to operate out of the Barry's Bay Railway Station and the Commermere Outdoor Rink Building for use in washrooms and use of the surrounding grounds at no charge. That council accept the MV RFQ 11 structural snow load assessment for PJYCC report as information. And that council approve the lowest bid to AARL structural consulting engineers and allow them to proceed as soon as reasonably possible with the audit due to ice installation. That the CEO clerk has council approval to sign the memorandum of understanding with the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Club for the period of 2020-21. And that council approves the use of the municipal garage conditional to the requirement of a third-party liability insurance certificate from the Ontario Federation of Snowmobile Club. Under planning, there were 2 recommendations. That pursuant to the agreement entered into between Bruder Developments Limited and the Corporation of the Townships of Sherwood, Jones and Burns, registered as instrument number 04-20829. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley hereby consent to the assignment of the agreement as relates to Part 3 on Reference Plan 49R 13560 to the Tammy and Douglas Pekarsky and Leanne Pekarsky, and hereby authorize the Mayor and CEO Clerk to execute any required documentation to implement this assignment, and furthermore, that the notice of the assignment be registered on title to the property relating to PIN 57569-0166 LT. That pursuant to the notice, agreement registered as RE 192718, Council has no objection to the further assignment of the agreement for the benefit of KNA Logistics Limited and hereby authorizes the Mayor and CEO Clerk to execute any required documentation to implement this assignment. Under finance, there were 3 recommendations. That the treasurer has council approval to send a letter to the financial institution requesting that the junior accounting clerk and the deputy treasurer be added as users for online banking access for the township of Madawaska Valley. And that council approves draft SOP GA02 for adoption into the township of Madawaska Valley corporate policies. That the finance department's request is approved to begin phasing out the acceptance of checks in foreign currency as a form of payment ending April 1, 2021, at which time foreign checks will no longer be accepted. And that should payment be received in foreign currency for checks only, a $20 administrative charge be applied to the resident tax roll. That the donation request from the Renfrew County Regional Science Fair is approved as presented in the amount of $200. And that is all the recommendations.
Great, thank you, Sue. So I'll ask, does council wish to discuss any of the recommendations under roads and waste management?
Oh,
No, okay. Does council wish to discuss any recommendations under Recreation and Community Development Committee?
No,
Okay, we're good with that one. Any recommendations under planning matters and statutory meeting under the Planning Act? Do you wish to discuss those?
no,
And finally, any of the recommendations under finance and administration? Okay, I'm not seeing any desire to discuss any of them. So Sue, if you could just read the recommendation at the top that captures them all, and I'll get a mover and a seconder.
That the council and committee meeting minutes for October 6, 2020 be approved as presented with the recommendations as read.
Okay, could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any final discussion on the council and committee meeting minutes? Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay. Any business arising from the minutes? Councillor Poplinski.
Yes, Mayor Love, I'm just wondering if we could refer back to the meeting of September the 15th and in relation to the supporting the resolution on the cannabis, you made a request from the staff to research and bring back, is that still forthcoming on how we're going to proceed with some of these issues?
Sue.
Yes, it is, Councillor Poplinski. We're working on some examples for council as what an interim bylaw looks like and how it may apply to us.
Okay, and thank you. And I have a question related to the minutes of the September the 22nd meeting. And it was in regards to the financial statement that was presented. I'm wondering, are we to expect one at the end of the third quarter dealing with the financial situation? Our revenues and expenses?
So you're looking for a revenue and expense update?
Yeah, normally we would have that by now.
Maybe I could ask the treasurer, Amanda, would you be able to provide us with a revenue and expense update at our next meeting?
Yes, I can.
That'll include the third quarter.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, great. No problem. We'll make sure that happens. Any-
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Sue.
Just for consistency, we are trying to bring them up at the council and committee meetings, which is the first meeting of each month, so that there's a better opportunity for discussion as well.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Okay, any other business arising from the minutes? Okay, I'm not seeing any. We will then move to municipal report. Where I'm at. First, I have severance application B31-21 and B32-22. Owner applicant Michael A. Koznaski. Now, when someone said to me that, there, okay. To be present is here. Both people. Okay, I had to double check. I had to make sure we had members of the public who were key to this severance application here. All right, owner applicant Michael A. Koznaski, part of lots 13 and 14, concession 8 in the geographic township of Radcliffe, now in the township of Madawaska Valley in the county of Renfrew. B31-21 is 60 meters by 158.5 meters and 0.93 hectares, 2.32 acres. B32-22 is 57.92 times 146.3 meters, which is 0.837 hectares or 2.07 acres. Location 748 Old Barry's Bay Road, Barry's Bay, Ontario. Silas, you're here with us. Did you want me to read the recommendation and get a mover, or did you want to speak to this first?
I think I can probably just go over the memo very quickly, just to summarize it. There are 3 points that the manager of planning services from the county of Renfrew pointed out, that the favorable comments from the township of public works be provided, favorable comments from council regarding the creation of a 4th and 5th use lot, and provision of a site plan in accordance with section 3.3.1 of zoning bylaw. The last point, that is in our bylaw, that anyone who wishes to develop their property, in this case, it's a large tract of land, which already the site plan was provided when the construction of the garage occurred. So there is no requirement for that. Moving on, with respect to the chief building official, septic inspector, chief fire official, they approve of the applications. And as residential lots, the operations manager as well has no concerns or objections to the approval of the severance application. So that basically answers item 1 of the County of Renfrew comment. And I have just explained some of the other documentation that was presented to the municipality, which was sent to the Secretary Treasurer. One was from Don Olszewski with some comments, and I think they basically speak to themselves. Council has had an opportunity to review those letters in their package, so I'll just leave it to you, Madam Mayor, to read the recommendation.
Okay, before I do, if I could just make sure that I clarify to everyone listening some of the concerns that were raised and how they are addressed. So I just want to just verify with you that a trailer park would require a rezoning. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's not an issue. It would be a matter of rezoning.
Correct.
Permanently placing a trailer on a lot would require a zoning bylaw amendment.
Not if someone wanted to place a trailer on this property, it has to meet the required setbacks and distances. So it is in a rural zone, so there are provisions for mobile homes or
Okay. So, but one, not multiple.
That's correct.
Okay, no, that's good. I want to make sure everyone understands that the concerns that are being raised are able to be addressed. And then could you just verify for me that the proposed right-of-way is not needed for the creation of these lots?
That is correct. The application for the right-of-way is file number B124 of 18. It was placed in abeyance and subsequently the applicant, Mr. Kuznatski, submitted these 2 applications. So these 2 have been bumped up prior to that right-of-way creation. So at this point in time, the right-of-way application has no bearing, as I haven't received the actual application from the land division at this point.
Okay, so it is not required before these lots can be created.
That is correct.
Okay, that's fine. These were points that were brought up in the letter expressing concerns, so I wanted to verify how they are addressed and how, therefore, those concerns are not necessarily a factor for council.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so our recommendation is that council approves severance application B31-21, which lot has already been developed as a residential lot, and furthermore, that council does not have any concerns with the creation of a 4th new lot. So I have 2 recommendations. Do you want me to do them separately?
That would be great. Yes, please.
Okay, so having read that recommendation, could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Any discussion on the recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The second recommendation is that council approves severance application B32-22 for residential purposes. And furthermore, that council does not have any concerns with the creation of a 5th new lot. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Bromwich. Any discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, great. Thank you. Our next item is safe routes agreement. Oh, sorry, did I need to do something else?
Madam Mayor, I think there were some attendees that wanted to speak to the application, just as you mentioned prior to starting.
Oh, okay. Did they need to speak to it?
I'm not sure.
I thought they were here just to listen in case there were any questions.
Okay, I wasn't sure because it was last minute. I wasn't aware of any attendees. It just came up on the screen now, so I wasn't sure what the protocol was.
Okay, well, then I'll ask the two attendees if you have any concerns with the approval of the recommendations. Did you want to speak to them or?
No, I'm good. It's
Okay.
Jim Koznowski. Our property abuts, and I was wondering about, how we would get our driveway situation resolved, and this didn't really give me a ton of information. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I guess that will be left to another day. And Howe and Bradley are here. I don't know if they wish to speak to this either. I did not realize that we were going to be doing it that way. Okay.
Oh, good morning, Council. I'll be speaking to the Tallis and Stamplekoski road closures.
Okay.
We're here to provide assistance.
Okay. All right. Thank you. just trying to verify who's here for what. All right. So if there's nothing further on this one, then we're good, Silas?
Yes, we are. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. We'll move on to Safe Restart Agreement Phase 2. And I believe Amanda had provided this report for us. Amanda, did you want to speak to it? Or maybe Amanda's not there. Amanda?
I'll quickly go and get her.
Okay, she might have stepped out. Okay.
She'll be joining shortly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Here I am.
Ah, there she is. Sorry, you can't leave your desk.
No.
Did you want to speak to your report on the Safe Restart?
Oh, the Safe Start Agreement. Yes. So at the council and committee meeting, I presented my report with the breakdown of the funding, the 193,500 that we had originally received or will be receiving from the province under what was called the Safe Restart Agreement Phase 1. And then within that agreement, there was identified that there will be a Phase 2 opportunity available for additional funding. And that is due October 30th. So the direction was for me to investigate whether we could potentially tap into that funding source. And when I sat in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs webinar on an explanation of how to apply and what the funding was for, it was made very clear from the ministry staff that this is 2020 operational pressures. So if the only time that you can apply for that additional Phase 2 funding is if the Phase 1 does not cover what you expect your pressures would to be for 2020. So in doing the application, you have to submit your original budget and then your revised budget to clearly show any changes or additional withdrawings from reserves to offset any pressures and costs that may have been borne by the municipality as a result of the COVID pandemic. And therefore, based on the analysis that was provided at the last council and committee meeting, we had some monies left over that we figured that we could use for additional cleaning staff. And therefore, I am not recommending that we apply for the Phase 2 portion because it is so restrictive and it is strictly for 2020 budget pressures only.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you sitting through that and finding out the details to ensure that we weren't missing out on an opportunity. It's not an opportunity that we would be able to take advantage of.
Right. A lot of municipalities are kind of disappointed because there's some capital expenditures that may come out of this whole thing with having to move into Zoom meetings and changing things around, but unfortunately they will not, they're very clear, they will not cover capital expenditures.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for doing that. Does council have any questions for Amanda on the us not applying for phase 2? I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, so thank you very much, Amanda. We do appreciate you doing that work for us. All right, I guess we'll move on then into bylaws. First, we have bylaw 2020-72 regarding a road allowance closure and disposition along lots 5 and 6. Concession 3 designated as Part 1 on reference plan 49R-19573, Geographic Township of Sherwood, County of Renfrew, REI-2019-10. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-72, being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of part of an original allowance for road between lots 5 and 6, Concession 3, Geographic Township of Sherwood, now in the Township of Madawaska Valley, in the County of Renfrew, being part of PIN 57575-0263 LT, and for the sale thereof to the abutting landowner be given third and final reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Poplinski. Is there any discussion on the bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next is bylaw 2020-73 regarding a shoreline road allowance closure and disposition along Carson Lake in front of lot 7, register plan 539, designated as part 1 on reference plan 49R-19583, Geographic Township of Jones, County of Renfrew, STA-2019-05. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-73, being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of part of an original allowance for road along Carson Lake, fronting part lot 7, plan 539, Geographic Township of Jones, now in the Township of Madawaska Valley in the County of Renfrew, being part of PIN 57554-0260 LT, and for the sale thereof to the abutting landowner be given third and final reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Is there any discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next, we have bylaw 2020-74 regarding shoreline road allowance closure and disposition along Wadsworth Lake in front of lot 20, concession 13, designated as part 2 on reference plan 49R-7220, Geographic Township of Radcliffe, County of Renfrew, TAL-2020-02. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-74, being a bylaw to provide for the closing and stopping up of part of an original allowance for road along Wadsworth Lake, fronting lot 20, concession 13, Geographic Township of Radcliffe, now in the Township of Madawaska Valley in the County of Renfrew, being part of PIN 57581-0089 LT, and for the sale thereof to the abutting landowners be given third and final reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Is there any discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next is bylaw 2020-90 regarding amendment to bylaw number 2014-90, addition of policy SOP-GA-02, accounts payable, standard operating procedures, SOP. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-90, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2014-90, with respect to the addition of policy number SOP-GA-02, accounts payable, standard operating procedures, SOP, to the corporate policies and procedures for the Corporation of the Township of Madawaska Valley be given first and second reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Any discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-90 be given third and final reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Counselor Wilmer, seconded by Counselor Poplinski. Any final discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next, we have bylaw 2020-91 regarding parole office lease, sublease Helen Ben. Before I read the recommendation, I want to thank Sue for her patience and perseverance in getting this sublease to bylaw. Her sheer determination to succeed moved a bureaucratic mountain one pebble at a time. Awesome job. It just needs to be recognized. Sue.
Let's wait till we have the other side signed back.
Absolutely true, but this has
Thank
been
you.
a very long time in the making, and
It
every
has been, yes.
has been scrutinized rigorously. So I had to say it because I know how hard you've worked to get this done. Anyways, the recommendation is that bylaw 2020-91 being a bylaw to authorize the entering into of a lease agreement between Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario as represented by the Minister of Government and Consumer Services and sublease with Helen Ben, parole office located at 43 Dunn Street, Barry's Bay, Ontario, be given first and second reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Counselor Poplinski, seconded by Counselor Wilmer. Is there any discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. The recommendation is that bylaw 2020-91 be given third and final reading this 20th day of October 2020. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Counselor Schulis, seconded by Counselor Bromwich. Any final discussion on this bylaw? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Well, Sue, at least our part is done. Let's hope it goes through on the other end.
Well, I do think our solicitor as well as Silas know it by heart now, the amount of rewrites we've had to do with this bylaw, but thank you.
Oh, I know, absolutely. It was certainly a work long coming to fruition. Okay, so we are now at correspondence information. I believe, where am I at for time? I'm hoping that we can get everything done prior to in camera for about 12:30. I don't know if we'll get there. And Sue, did you arrange for anyone who needs to speak to us in camera for 1? Was that done?
I sent the 1 o'clock time slot. I haven't looked to see if they responded to that. Hopefully
Okay.
before noon they will.
Okay, well, I'm targeting to get there for that, but we'll just see what happens. Okay, so we'll move into correspondence information. First, we have a letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing dated October 1st, 2020, read the Safe Restart Agreement. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing has outlined their expectations for municipalities applying for Phase 2 funding under this agreement. And as we've heard from our treasurer, it's very challenging to apply for. Any comments from council? We will just accept this as information then. Next, we have the AMO annual report regarding the 2019 federal gas tax fund. And Madawaska Valley is actually, our Lakeshore Drive project was referenced in the report on, I believe, page 25. I'd like to thank the treasurer and staff for submitting this project to AMO for their annual report. Any comments from council? Okay. I mean, it's nice to see us being represented in this report, and I do appreciate the staff did have to submit all the information in order for this to happen. So we will accept this as information as well. Okay, next is a, oops, no, I got the report, sorry. Next is a letter from St. Francis Valley Healthcare Foundation dated September 24th, 2020 regarding the donation to the Valley Manor redevelopment project. So council has received this letter of thanks for the municipality's contribution in 2020 to the Valley Manor redevelopment project. The new funding model announced by the province means this project continues to move ahead. So it is good news. Any comments from council? Okay, accept this as information as well.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I do still believe we are trying to do a check presentation. We were just waiting for a better opportunity, hoping that COVID would allow us kind of a window where we could do that. So we've left it like to Erin to notify us if and when they want to do that.
Okay. All right. No, it would be great if we could. We'd all have to be masked. It'd be a wide angle shot with us all 6 feet apart. A very big check will be needed, but it will be great if that could happen. Okay, so our next item, our final item on information is a letter from the County of Renfrew dated October 15th, 2020 regarding the Safe Restart Program. So Warden Robinson has sent a letter to Minister Clark requesting that municipalities be given the flexibility to use funding from the Safe Restart Program for capital expenditures related to COVID-19. And as we have heard from our treasurer, those are some of the anticipated expenditures to be able to function in a COVID-19 environment that would be capital expenditures that unfortunately aren't considered under this program. And so I think it's good to know that this letter has been sent. The warden is attempting to buy us a little more flexibility for how the funding is used. Any comments from council? We will accept this as well as information. All right, correspondence action items. First, we have an expenditure request from Ontario Clean Water Agency dated October 13th, 2020 regarding Capital Controls PLC backwash repairs. Sue, did you want to read the recommendation?
That Ontario Clean Water Agency Work Order 1874889 for the Barry's Bay Water Treatment Plant filter backwash programming be approved in the amount of $1,363.33.
Can I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Schulis, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any discussion on the recommendation? Sue?
Mr. Pilgrim offered just clarification that this was budgeted in our 2020 major maintenance forecast. It was for a PLC board that had failed, which controls the backwash for filter 2. The programmer had to come from Ottawa, which was the cost to complete the installation and programming of the spare logic board.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything further from council on the recommendation? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? And that's carried. Next, we have a resolution from Wollaston Township regarding Elections Act. This one was interesting. The Township of Wollaston is asking for our support of their resolution, calling on Minister Clark to review the Municipal Elections Act and close a loophole that allowed non-resident lessees of sleeping cabins, bunkies, and sheds to be added to their voters list in 2018. Any discussion from council on this? Do we wish to support Wollaston in their desire for this to be reviewed? Sue?
I had a few questions for Wollaston, and unfortunately I didn't have time to follow up with this resolution to give you further clarification why it's coming to the table.
Would council like further clarification?
I think so.
Okay, could you follow up with them then and bring this resolution back for council's consideration?
Absolutely.
If there's any concerns with how people are ending up on the voters list, those do need to be addressed. Okay, so we'll ask that staff bring us back further information. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else from council. I got next. Oh, okay. So next we have a resolution of support for the Renfrew County Virtual Triage and Assessment Center. And council, I apologize. I thought they just needed a letter of support, but what was actually requested was a resolution of support. So what I've done is drafted a resolution of support based on the information that was provided at county for Madawaska Valley. I know you've had a chance to read it. Sue, do you want to read the resolution?
Yes. Whereas recent statistics show that 24,000 residents in the County of Renfrew and City of Pembroke do not have a family doctor. And whereas the number of primary care physicians expected to retire or close their practices within the next 2 to 5 years will leave an additional 10,000 residents across this area without access to primary care. And whereas the number of orphaned patients and the shortage of primary care physicians is placing great strain on healthcare services in the township of Madawaska Valley and area, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the lack of access to primary care through reduced hours at family physician offices, and whereas flattening the curve of COVID-19 has meant ensuring the availability of testing for asymptomatic and symptomatic people while protecting the hospital emergency department's surge capacity, and whereas the need to meet these healthcare priorities across a large rural setting required an innovative solution, resulting in the Renfrew County Virtual Triage and Assessment Center model being adopted rather than a static assessment center. And whereas RC VTAC resulted in a significant reduction in 911 calls, unnecessary emergency room visits, the elimination of hallway medicine, and created access to primary care for thousands of residents without a family doctor across Renfrew County. And whereas the concept of virtual triage and assessment has the potential of improving access to long-term care for seniors by supporting them to age at home. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council for the Township of Madawaska Valley supports the County of Renfrew in its efforts to establish a permanent virtual triage and assessment center VTAC, and hereby urges the Minister of Health to make permanent the billing codes that would allow the creation of VTAC in communities across Ontario. And further, that a copy of this resolution supporting the continuation of VTAC and its potential for addressing the health needs of seniors and rural residents be sent to the Premier, Minister of Health, Minister of Long-Term Care, the Honorable John Yakubuski MPP for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke, and the County of Renfrew.
Okay, you've heard the resolution. It's based on the information provided in regards to VTAC. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Is there any discussion on the resolution? I think we all recognize this has been a really good service for our community. All right, if there's no discussion, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, gentlemen. I do appreciate that. It tidies up our need to provide a resolution if we supported the service, and we do. Okay, new business. We have upcoming meeting schedule, a verbal. So I guess I'll turn it over to Sue.
Yes, just at the staff meeting, we were talking about the first week of November being a scheduled meeting. In the past, we have had a few issues with it being hunting season, and we don't have any timelines coming up right now of something that is prioritized for that first meeting. So we just wanted council discussion in availability, and if they felt one meeting for November as opposed to two would suffice, or if there was a commitment that everyone would be able to attend both meetings. I did want to note that at the previous council meeting, I did state that I was away for a couple of days in November, the 4th being one of them. So I just wanted to make that note as well.
Okay, council, if we were to proceed with the November 3rd council and committee meeting, are you able to attend, or are there those of you who would not be available? Anyone not available? Councillor Poplinski?
Yes, I will not be available on the 3rd.
Okay, anyone else? At this point, what we could do is we could look at doing a combined meeting on the 17th so that you're not missing any of the information. Would council be interested in doing that? Doing council and committee followed by tidying up anything to do with our council work with one meeting in November? Councillor Wilmer.
I have, unfortunately, I have medical appointments on the 17th in Ottawa.
Okay. Would everyone, can we choose a different date then? Would everyone be available on the 10th, or is that too soon after the hunt starts? Oh, sorry, Mr. Larbetsky, I have a timing problem, do I?
Yes, we do. Unfortunately, we have planning matters that are coming up on the 17th.
Okay, so we have to maintain a meeting on the 17th.
Yes, please.
All right. Does council, I guess then the option is to continue with November 3rd and November 17th, or to combine the two meetings into November 17th. Councillor Wilmer, you would be the one who was missing if we combined the two meetings. Your thoughts? Would you prefer we went with the two meetings?
Yeah, I would prefer the two, but if the rest of the council feels it's better to go with one longer meeting on the 17th, I'm okay with that. I may be able to follow some of it on Zoom from my cell phone too, so I may be able to participate for some time.
Okay, so I need some direction for staff. Do we want to go with one meeting on the 17th? Councillor Bromwich, sorry.
I would prefer to combine the two into one meeting, and we'd eliminate, the hunt season problem a little bit more. I'll go along with that. We would at least have quorum, I think, and possibly Mark could follow up, as he said, just check in once in a while to see if there's any contentious issues on the table. If there was, we could possibly notify him and let him zoom in on us. So I would go with the two, if that's possible. We'd have a quorum, I think.
The two combined into one.
Yes.
Councillor Wilmer, if when you get the agenda, there's something you want to speak to, we could possibly time that item so that you would be able to zoom in and attend for that item.
That would be helpful. As long as it's at certain periods, I won't be able to attend, but certainly once I get the agenda, I'll have a look at it, and if that's possible, that would.
Yeah, I think that's a good, it would be a good compromise to allow for those who do want to go hunting. And so, Sue, we're looking at one meeting on the 17th, and we'll just have to be flexible about how we approach our agenda based on if Councillor Wilmer, has any concerns. Okay, Sue?
And that's fine. So I'd propose that a motion be that council approve that the November 3rd, 2020 council and committee meeting be canceled. And to that point, I just wanted to add, should there be timeline sensitive issues that arise, we could advise council with 48 hours notice to hold a special council meeting for a special purpose.
Okay. All right. So you want a motion to that effect. Get a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Schulist. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Excuse me, I think I have a frog in my throat today. Okay, so there is another conflict that I do have with the December 15th council meeting. I have county council the exact same day and the exact same time. So I'm wondering, Sue, I maybe better check with Mr. Larbetsky if there's anything that's time sensitive for December 15th.
Madam
Yes.
Mayor, at this point, I don't have anything, so I think we're good.
Would council prefer to proceed without me or would you prefer could we move the meeting? I can't get county council to move. There's no way. Could we move it either to the 16th or the 14th?
Yeah.
So what would staff prefer?
I'll leave that to the deputy clerk. I would believe that the Monday would be difficult to get everything ready. So possibly the 16th, I would assume the Wednesday, if that's okay with the deputy clerk, if that works for scheduling the Zooms.
Okay, is council available?
Yes.
December 16th, we're all available?
Yeah.
Okay. And Gwen, did you have any concerns with going with the 16th?
No, not at all. That'll work.
Okay. So could I get a motion to move the December regular council meeting to December 16th? Moved by Councillor Poplinski, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Poplinski. Oh,
Yeah, yes, Mayor Love, I just want to mention about it's difficult to pick dates ahead because, as many will attest to, many of the medical appointments that we've experienced that were put off for the last several months are now coming in some cases with very short notice. And just like Councillor Wilmer mentioned, he had a medical appointment. There's some anticipated in our family. So right now I'm free the day of the 16th, but that could change. And I think that I'm probably speaking for others as well. So it's just the world we're living in at the current time and not being able to get appointments. And when you do get them, you have to go. You can't. Okay, so thank you.
No, and I do appreciate that. And it isn't often that county council has a direct conflict with our council meetings, but for some reason, that's the date they chose to do the only county council meeting in December. With all the other days, that's the one to go. So I think we have to just be mindful. And I guess, Silas, if something comes up that is going to be time sensitive in December, if you could let us know ASAP. If it has to be the 16th, so we're aware of that. And council, any member of council who does suddenly get a conflict, please let staff know ASAP, because if we do have to move a meeting, we want to give as much notice as possible. Okay, Sue, does that, did I call the vote?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Sometimes you lose track of what you've done. Okay. All right, so we've dealt with our immediate scheduling issues to the end of the year. Unfinished business. First is the EORN update to Renfrew County dated September 30th, 2020. I provided council with this update from the Eastern Ontario Regional Network, EORN, on their current projects to improve cell service and universal broadband across Renfrew County and Eastern Ontario. The demand for coverage has been modeled based on where households, businesses, and facilities are actually located on a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer grid, instead of the large hexagons that have been used in the past, where if one person in this enormous hexagon had service, the hexagon was considered served. So that's good news that they're doing this modeling very intensely to ensure that we're getting coverage where it's needed. EORN and the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus have endorsed and are pursuing the 1 gig project rather than a 5010 megabyte per second service. And that's in order to meet future needs for coverage and capacity when the project is completed. They don't want to complete the project and then be behind the 8 ball because the system they've installed doesn't have the capacity for the service that's required when the project is finally completed. So we got this update at County Council, and I thought it was important that you be aware that this is going on and that this is the direction that those projects are taking. Any comments or discussion from council? We're basically just accepting this as information, for your information and for the public's information. Okay. Next is Information and Privacy Commissioner Mediator's Report regarding Appeal MA 20-00222. We are accepting this as information. Sue?
Thank you. Just a verbal, an email dated October 18th, 2020, referencing this item, 16.2 from the IPC on the agenda was received by Mr. Roger Paul. It has been forwarded via email to each council member. I have forwarded the letter to our municipal solicitor as it involves matter in current litigation.
Okay, thank you. And then our next item is verbal. Okay, Golden Years Activity Center, verbal update. Sue?
Yes, I will give this update on behalf of the Recreation Community Development Coordinator. She's presently working on something else. There was a site visit at the Commermere Seniors Building with representatives from the Food Bank and the Commermere Seniors Group, as well as Councillor Poplinski and Stephanie. The Recreation Community Development Coordinator provided me with this summary of their visit. A review of the proposed use of the building, including how future shared use could work, was done. There was a discussion of the possibility of adding a loading dock at the cost of the food bank. At the staff meeting on Monday, the building department recommended they will do a review of the use and advise staff accordingly if there are any new requirements for council consideration. Suggestions of the next steps were proposed, which included background information from the food bank, proposed use, and the content of the rental facilities use agreement between the municipality and the food bank and what that would look like. I did speak to and asked Mr. Paul Thompson, the president of the Madawaska Valley Food Bank, to send me a quick email as to his views on the visit. And he responded after the site visit on Thursday, October 15. the MV Food Bank is very much interested in proceeding with the plan to move to 1090 Farmer Road. The Madawaska Valley Food Bank is incorporated and will provide 2018 and 2019 financial statements as requested by the township. The Madawaska Valley Food Bank is a longtime member in good standing of Feed Ontario, which was formerly known as Ontario Association of Food Banks, which is the provincial associate with food banks across Ontario, across Canada. I did get a brief update from Stephanie just earlier by email that the buildings department staff did attend the site today, and they've done an inspection and have requested that based on the change of use of the facility, the statements that were made about needing to put some freezers, that an engineer perform a review of the structure floor loading. They don't think it would be a very extensive review, just that we need to call Richard Bulow or someone of that with that accreditation to give us kind of their thoughts on the floor loading. Also discussed, they were reviewing the compliance of accessibility in the existing ramp, and they'll provide some suggestions to that. So that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for Sue on this? Councillor Poplinsky.
Yes, thanks, Mayor Love. No, I think it's would be very good to utilize this building for this purpose. And I was quite pleased with the meeting that took place. There's a lot of good discussion. And one of the things that came up was that the location, and that presents its own challenges in terms of people from Barry's Bay without transportation, and that they would be continuing to look for probably a more permanent place within the village of Barry's Bay. So I would like to see the agreement indicate that, at the end of the year, we'll review it, which, I think would only be fair to everyone. And we may want to do that. So if that could be part of the agreement, but in the meantime, I think we should encourage the group to use it. I think it would be good for everyone. And it's just good to be able to help out, because I think it's a very worthy cause. And I just wish them well. I think we can certainly accommodate their wishes.
Okay, so Sue, is that something that could be included, and we would be talking year-end 2021, that there would be a review?
Yes.
And maybe there should be an annual review, just both from their side, they can consider how it's going, and also from the municipality side. Did we incorporate an annual review, Sue?
Absolutely, and based on how positive the site review was, and I wanted to highlight to council that they are seeking some funding that would help them, possibly with some capital costs, building a removable loading dock, for example, any small repairs that maybe they'd be able to provide towards the building. But the grant closes the end of November. So if council feels comfortable, I would like a resolution of council to direct staff to prepare the agreement in principle for council review between the MV Food Bank and the Township of Madawaska Valley for the lease and the use of the municipal building at 1030 Farmer Road. And I think if I could get such a resolution, then we could get started on that, have them review it, send it to council for review, so that they would know then if they can move forward with that grant application prior to the end of November.
Right, so we would need this to come, do we need this to come to us by bylaw in November?
Yes, it would.
Council would need to review the document in advance of that, and if you have any concerns, address them directly to staff so they can be dealt with, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so then basically I need a mover for, now you said council directs staff to prepare an agreement in principle between the Madawaska Valley Food Bank and the Township of Madawaska Valley for a lease and use of the municipal building at 1030 Farmer Road. Could I get a move? Moved by Councillor Poplinsky, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, great. So if we can get that ball rolling for them, it'll be great to have a positive use of the building in our community. All right, where am I at now? Okay, there was, did I add Lakewood subdivision? I did add it, did I not? to the agenda?
You did?
Yes, under
Okay,
amended
sorry.
agenda.
I would have to shuffle back through. Yes, I did. Thank you. Okay. So our next item is 16.4, which was added, Lakewood subdivision tender and a verbal update. I don't know who's taking this. Is it Hillary or is you, Sue?
Yes, it is.
It's Hillary. Okay, Hillary, good morning.
Good morning. Well, almost afternoon.
We're getting
Okay,
there.
so we're working as per the recommendation about early September on advancing the tender for Lakewood Skeets Road. So we're seeking a resolution. We're putting the finishing touches to this tender. It's a little bit more work than what was originally deemed by the engineering firm McIntosh Perry and our engineering firm WSP. They're working together well. I believe that we have about one more week to go and then we're going to release it. So we're seeking a recommendation to proceed to the tender stage. And Sue crafted a resolution to that effect. So our timing will take us into winter, but we'll see where it takes us. Once we get the numbers back, and we're going to probably put it out there for 2 weeks, and hopefully we'll have it back in November if everything goes as planned. So we're seeking a resolution to release the tender.
Okay, does council have any questions of Hillary before I have Sue read the recommendation? No, okay. Sue, do you want to read the recommendation?
Yes, that council grants approval for staff to submit the tender document for the construction of Lakewood Skeets Road with a revised scope as approved, conditional to the operations manager and the municipal engineer's final approval.
Okay, thank you. Just before I ask for a mover, Sue, will the question I posed in regards to winter maintenance be answered prior to it being released?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Bromwich, seconded by Councillor Wilmer. Any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Okay, does that complete our work with Lakewoods then? All right, so our next item is in camera, and I'm hoping that what we can do is take a lunch break and come back for 1 o'clock, which is when anyone who is joining us in camera has arranged to do so. So could I get a mover that we take lunch until 1 o'clock? Oh, sorry.
Kim, sorry.
Yes?
Could we go into in camera and then take the break in camera? It's much easier for the Zoom meeting and for the participants knowing that not to come back to just to advertise that we're going into in camera. If that works for everybody.
Sure, I can do that. Not a problem. So we will do that. Okay, so the in-camera session. That the meeting enter in-camera session to discuss matters pertaining to the security of the property of the municipality or local board, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Ontario Municipal Act 2001, Chapter 25, Section 239, 2A, B, and F. Number 1 is the special council meeting minutes in camera of September 8th, 2020. Number 2, regular council meeting minutes in camera of September 15th, 2020. Number 3, special council meeting minutes in camera of September 22nd, 2020. Number 4, council and committee meeting minutes in camera of October 6th, 2020. Number 5, Wishart Law Firm update regarding court file number CV-19-000-82269-0000. Number 6, Templeman LLP regarding wastewater plant update of court file. Number 7, Templeman LLP regarding human resources policy D-03 legal review. Could I get a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Wilmer, seconded by Councillor Poplinski. All those in favor? And that's carried. We